Children of light, hear these words with the fullness of your spirit, for they are not spoken to frighten you but to awaken you. You are about to lose the house you currently live in because it was never meant to contain the fullness of who you are becoming. The walls that surround you were built for an earlier version of you, a version that played small, bowed to fear, and accepted less than the destiny written into your very being. That shelter was a comfort, yes, but also a cage disguised as safety. Now, a greater call reverberates through the heavens. Rise. Do not confuse the shaking of your foundations with punishment. It is summoning. It is the sound of your old life collapsing, so a truer one can be constructed. You are being moved, not expelled, moved into a space aligned with your purpose, your courage, your divine inheritance. For when the eternal realms set a transformation in motion, no earthly structure, no familiar routine, no comfortable pattern can remain untouched. You are being escorted out of a dwelling that can no longer sustain your growth. You are being guided toward a place where your spirit will expand instead of shrink. Do not cling to what is passing. Do not grip the doorframe of a chapter that is closed. The house may fall, but you will not. Stand firm. Stand armored in truth, strength and clarity. Let the illusions crumble like dust beneath your feet. Let every fear be scattered by the authority of heaven's light. For you are not losing a house, you are being led to a kingdom, and when the moment comes that the old roof lifts from above you, raise your eyes, for a greater shelter awaits, one built not with timber and nails, but with purpose, protection, and divine power. Thus I speak, thus it shall be. The old house cannot contain who you are becoming, and this truth unfolds not as a simple metaphor, but as a spiritual law at work in the architecture of your life. A house is more than wood, walls, and windows. It is the external echo of an internal state. It reflects your beliefs, your habits, your expectations, and the level of identity you once accepted as enough. But when you begin to grow, when your spirit stretches into new space, mentally, emotionally, or spiritually, the environment that once felt suitable becomes too small, too restrictive, too dim to hold who you are transforming into. This is not an insult to the past, nor a condemnation of where you have been. It is merely the nature of growth. What fits at one stage becomes suffocating at another. The life you're stepping into requires more room than your old self ever needed. There comes a moment in every journey of transformation when the familiar becomes outdated, not because it was wrong but because it served its purpose. The house you are in now, literal or symbolic, was constructed around old choices, old fears, old priorities, and old versions of yourself that no longer command your allegiance. You have outgrown the ceilings that once felt high, and the doors that once felt open now feel like narrow thresholds that block your stride. You can sense the tightness even before the circumstances around you begin to shift. You feel the inner pressure, the subtle discomfort, the whisper that says, "I cannot stay this small." This is the first sign that the house cannot contain you anymore. As your identity expands, so does the energy you carry. Growth brings clarity, strength, courage, and a greater sense of purpose. But these qualities cannot be confined within environments that were designed during seasons of limitation. The old house carries the imprints of decisions made in survival mode, or in self-doubt, or in the early stages of your awakening. You are no longer defined by those energies, yet the space around you still reflects them. It is like trying to house a roaring flame inside a small lantern. It will either smother the flame or shatter the lantern. Neither outcome is meant for you. The transformation happening within you demands a structure capable of holding the heat, the light, and the power of who you are becoming. And so life begins to shift, sometimes gently, sometimes forcefully, but always in alignment with the expansion you can no longer contain. You may feel pushed, pressured, or disrupted, but understand this: it is the environment cracking, not you. The world around you responds to your inner growth the same way a seed pod splits open when the sprout within becomes too large to remain inside. From the outside, that cracking looks like loss, transition, or instability. But from the inside, it is liberation. It is the natural progression of your evolution. The old house shakes because your spirit is outgrowing its shape. Many people misinterpret this breaking point as failure or punishment. They believe losing a place, a structure, or a familiar situation is a sign that something has gone wrong. But this is not destruction. It is release. The house must loosen its hold because you can no longer remain in the dimensions it offers. It is not rejecting you. It is acknowledging the truth that you no longer belong to the limitations that once framed your life. Your spirit is asking for more, and the universe is rearranging the physical world to match that request. You may feel attachments tug at your heart. You may feel the weight of memories made within those walls, or the comfort of routines that kept you anchored. But comfort is not the same as alignment. What is familiar may feel safe, but safety is not the same as destiny. The house served you when you needed grounding, but now it hinders you when you need expansion. You cannot carry out a greater mission while living in a space shaped by a smaller identity. This is why the walls feel closer than before, why the air feels thinner, why the sense of belonging has subtly faded. You are growing, and the house is not. When life removes you from a place, it is because staying would shrink you. When life dismantles a structure around you, it is because that structure cannot support the weight of your future. The house you currently live in cannot withstand the magnitude of your next season. Your calling has outgrown your comfort. Your purpose has outgrown your surroundings. Your soul has outgrown the limitations that your old environment represents. This is not a loss. This is preparation. There is a greater place prepared for you. One that resonates with your new frequency, one that matches your expanded identity, one that allows your gifts, your courage, and your power to move freely without constraint. But you cannot enter that new space while clinging to an old one. Transformation requires departure. Growth requires movement. Destiny requires that you walk out of the door of the old house so that you can cross the threshold of the new. So when the house begins to loosen its grip on you, when circumstances push you forward, when change moves you out of familiar spaces, when the walls that once held you now release you, understand that this is not the end of something you need. It is the end of something that no longer fits. It is the evidence that your spirit is enlarging, your path is widening, and your destiny is rising up to meet you. The old house cannot contain who you are becoming. It was never meant to. It was a chapter, not your story. A season, not your eternity. And now, as that chapter comes to its close, your only task is to step forward, not with fear, but with the certainty that what waits for you is greater than what you leave behind. Collapse precedes elevation, for in every spiritual ascent there is a moment where the ground beneath you must break so that you can rise beyond it. Collapse is not the opposite of growth. It is the clearing that makes growth possible. When a structure falls away, when the familiar fragments, when something you relied on suddenly dissolves, it is not because you are being stripped of support, but because you are being removed from anything that can no longer carry the weight of your rising. Every collapse in your life is a signal that the old framework has reached its limit. It can go no further with you, and you can go no further within it. Elevation requires freedom from what restricts you, and collapse is the force that sets that freedom into motion. In the unseen realms, there is a principle that governs transformation. What is built for a smaller version of you cannot serve the expanded version you are becoming. When you grow internally, when your spiritual stature increases, when your identity strengthens, the outer structures that once felt stable begin to strain under the new weight. They bend, they tremble, they crack, until finally they can no longer hold their form. You may perceive this as loss, instability, or chaos, but in truth, it is the natural consequence of a spirit outgrowing its container. Nothing is collapsing because you are weak. Everything is collapsing because you are rising. Understand this deeply. Collapse is not random. It is precise. It removes only what stands in the way of your elevation. It shakes away false foundations. It dissolves illusions of safety. It strips away the attachments that once defined you, but now hold you back. You may not recognize the necessity of this in the moment, especially when the ground feels unsteady and the future seems veiled, but elevation always demands a release. You cannot ascend while still tethered to what weighs you down. You cannot rise while clinging to structures that keep you low. Collapse removes the heaviness so that ascent becomes inevitable. Even nature teaches this. Forests burn so that new life can be born. Stars explode so that new galaxies can form. Seeds break apart so that roots and leaves can emerge. Nothing ascends without first undergoing a moment of breaking. Collapse is the gateway to becoming. It is the threshold between limitation and expansion. It is the moment where your old identity dissolves so your higher self can step into its rightful place. From your perspective, it may feel like everything is falling apart. You may question why stability seems to vanish, just as you begin to gain clarity. But elevation is not built on the comfort of old structures. It is built on the openness created once those structures fall. If the familiar remained intact, you would have no reason to move, no reason to stretch, no reason to rise. Collapse is the divine catalyst that propels you forward. It reroutes your steps toward places you would never have chosen while still cradled by comfort. It interrupts your pattern so you can awaken to purpose. It removes you from what is small so you can enter what is vast. Every collapse carries a message: you cannot stay here. It speaks with a firmness that pushes you not down but up. It does not bury you, it uncovers you. It does not destroy your path. It reveals the one you were meant to walk. What seems like the end of stability is actually the beginning of alignment. What feels like losing everything is often gaining the only things that matter. Elevation does not arrive gently. It arrives through upheaval that clears room for your wings. You may feel fear as you witness what once held you begin to crumble. But fear is simply the echo of your old self resisting release. Your higher self understands this collapse intimately. It knows that you cannot remain anchored to a foundation built from smaller dreams, smaller expectations, smaller courage. It knows that where you are rising requires a new level of strength and clarity. It knows that the collapse is preparing you, not punishing you. There is also a hidden mercy in collapse. It prevents you from investing your energy into what was never truly stable to begin with. It exposes the weak points, the fractures, the illusions of permanence. It spares you from building your future on ground that could not sustain it. Collapse reveals what is true by removing what is false. And though this revelation may sting, though it may shake your heart, it liberates you from paths that were never meant to become your destiny. Elevation is waiting on the other side of this breaking. It does not happen in silence or stillness. It manifests in the very moment the old structure gives way. What you think is falling apart is actually falling into order. What you think is the end is actually the transition point into a higher realm of purpose. You are not being reduced. You are being refined. You are not being thrown down. You are being lifted up by the removal of everything that once held you lower than your calling. When you rise from the ashes of what collapsed, you rise clearer, lighter, and more aligned than ever before. Your vision sharpens, your courage strengthens, your intuition deepens. You recognize that the collapse did not take anything essential from you. It simply stripped away what your elevation could not carry. And when the new structures begin to form, ones that match your expanded spirit, ones that resonate with your higher identity, you will understand why everything had to fall the way it did. Collapse always comes first, because elevation cannot begin until the old is cleared. This is the divine order of transformation. The breakdown is the birth, the fall is the rise, the void is the passage. And though the process may shake every corner of your life, It is not a sign of abandonment, it is a sign of preparation. You are not being lowered, you are being launched, and everything collapsing around you is simply stepping aside so that nothing can hinder your ascent. You are being moved, not punished, though at times the transition may feel like everything familiar is slipping through your fingers. When life shifts beneath your feet, when doors close without warning, when the structures you relied on begin to dissolve, your first instinct may be to wonder what you did wrong. You may search your memories for mistakes, for missteps, for reasons that justify the instability. But understand this with absolute clarity. Not every shaking is a consequence. Many are assignments. Many are divine redirections. Many are movements meant to place you exactly where your growth, your purpose, and your future require you to be. Movement often disguises itself as disruption because the familiar rarely releases you without resistance. The life you've lived up until now was built on a certain rhythm, a certain comfort, a certain identity. But when a higher calling stirs within you, that old rhythm can no longer hold you. The routines that once supported you become too small. The roles you played no longer feel authentic. The walls around you, though once protective, begin to feel like constraints. And so life begins to rearrange itself, sometimes gently, sometimes abruptly, to escort you into alignment with who you must become. This is not punishment, it is positioning. Being moved often requires that something ends. This is the part that is most misunderstood. Humans cling to what is familiar, even if it is no longer serving them, because familiarity feels safe. But what feels safe and what is right are not always the same. Sometimes the place you have grown accustomed to is beneath your potential. Sometimes the people around you cannot walk with you into your next chapter. Sometimes the container of your life is too narrow for the fullness of the person you are becoming. And because you would not leave on your own, the universe begins to move you, not to harm you, but to draw you into the space that matches your rising identity. When you are being moved, circumstances shift in ways that push you out of comfort and into clarity. Opportunities you depended on may disappear, not because you failed, but because they are no longer meant for you. Paths that once felt open may close, not because you are unworthy, but because they would have led you away from your purpose. People may distance themselves, not because you are unlovable, but because your spirit is evolving beyond the frequency of that connection. Movement often feels like loss, but it is actually liberation. Think of a tree being transplanted. From the outside it looks uprooted, shaken, and exposed. Soil falls away from its roots. It is lifted from the ground it is known. But the gardener does not move the tree to harm it. The gardener moves the tree because it has outgrown the space where it was planted. Its roots require deeper soil. Its branches need more sky. Its potential demands a new environment where it can flourish. The movement may feel harsh, but it is an act of care, not cruelty. This is what is happening to you. You are being transplanted into a place where your growth will no longer be restricted. Often, You cannot see the new soil yet. All you see is the uprooting. All you feel is the detachment. All you notice are the gaps where something used to be. This is why movement feels like punishment to the untrained heart. But if you could see the path ahead, if you could glimpse the opportunities waiting, the relationships prepared, the breakthroughs aligning, you would understand that the discomfort is temporary, but the elevation is lasting. You are not being pushed down, you are being pulled forward. There is a sacred precision to the timing of your movement. Nothing is happening by accident. What you are losing is exactly what cannot remain. What is ending is exactly what cannot continue into the next version of your life. What is shifting is exactly what must shift to place you in the trajectory of your purpose. Movement is intentional, and though it often feels chaotic, it is directed with more wisdom than you realize. Sometimes you misinterpret the silence as abandonment, but silence often precedes redirection. When you feel isolated, it is not a sign that you are forgotten, it is a sign that you are being recalibrated. Old noise must quiet so that new instructions can form. Old attachments must loosen so that new connections can emerge. Old patterns must crumble so that new identity can rise. Movement requires stillness before it becomes clarity. You are not being punished by the silence. You are being prepared by it. Another truth is that punishment implies wrongdoing, but movement implies readiness. You are not being forced out because you failed. You are being moved because you are ready, ready for greater responsibility, deeper connection, higher alignment, and fuller expression of your purpose. Your readiness might not feel obvious to you, but it is unmistakable in the spiritual realm. Your growth has reached a threshold, and the life around you must shift to accommodate it. Sometimes you are being moved because you prayed for something bigger. You asked for growth, and growth requires leaving old spaces. You asked for clarity, and clarity requires the removal of confusion. You asked for strength, and strength is built through transitions. You asked for purpose, and purpose rearranges everything that is not aligned with it. Your prayers are being answered, but the answers do not always arrive in the form you expected. Movement is the highest form of protection. It pulls you away from what would have harmed you, even if you cannot yet see the danger. It places you in the right place at the right time, even if the timing feels inconvenient. It aligns you with what you are meant to experience, even if the path seems unfamiliar. When life moves you, trust that there is something ahead worth the disorientation. In time, you will look back on this moment and recognize that nothing was taken from you that you truly needed. You will see that what felt like a breaking was actually a redirecting. You will understand that the discomfort was a sign of transition, not judgment. Movement will make sense in hindsight. Every closed door, every sudden change, every unexpected ending. You will see clearly that you are not being punished. You are being guided. You are being moved into a life that matches your calling. You are being moved into a space that welcomes your expansion. You are being moved into alignment with what is meant for you. and though it may not feel gentle, it is purposeful, it is sacred, it is right on time. You are not being punished. You are being placed. Release what is passing. Stand firm in purpose, for every transition in life requires a letting go of what once felt necessary. The instinct to hold on is human. Familiarity feels safe, known paths feel stable, and the mind clings to what has history, even when the heart is already moving toward what has destiny. But growth demands release, not because the past was wrong, but because you cannot carry everything into the future you are being shaped for. Some seasons must end so that new ones can begin. Some attachments must loosen so that your spirit can breathe. Some identities must fall away so that the truth of who you are can stand revealed. Release is not loss, it is alignment. What is passing because it cannot remain. Its purpose in your life is complete. Its chapter is fulfilled. Its presence has taught you what it needed to teach you, strengthened you in the ways you required, and shaped you into someone capable of receiving more. Holding on to what is already dissolving is like gripping dust. No matter how tight your hand closes, it slips through your fingers. Release is the only act that allows your hands to open for what is next. But release is difficult, because the mind often confuses departure with danger. It assumes that if something leaves, something essential is lost. Yet life will never remove what is vital to your purpose. What departs is what cannot accompany you into the version of yourself that is emerging. You are evolving, and what aligns with your past may not align with your future. The path ahead requires a higher level of clarity, strength, and identity, qualities that cannot fully rise while you remain tethered to what once was. There is a quiet wisdom in letting go. It signals trust in the journey, trust in the unfolding, trust in the inner knowing that your path extends far beyond what your eyes can currently see. Release does not mean forgetting or dismissing the value of what came before. It means honoring its place in your story while understanding it cannot define the rest of the story. Every experience, every relationship, every season has its rightful time. And when that time closes, release becomes the act that honors the natural rhythm of your growth. Standing firm in purpose is the second half of this truth. Purpose is the anchor that remains steady while everything else shifts. Without purpose, release feels like falling into emptiness. With purpose, release feels like stepping into clarity. Purpose gives direction when old structures crumble. Purpose gives strength when familiar supports disappear. Purpose transforms uncertainty from a threat into a path. Purpose is not a vague idea, it is the deep knowing of who you are, what you value, and what you are becoming. It is the inner compass that guides you when circumstances are unstable. When you stand firm in purpose, you do not collapse with what collapses. You remain upright, centered, directed. You recognize that your identity is not rooted in the house you lived in, the situations you navigated, or the attachments you formed. It is rooted in the calling that burns within you. Standing firm in purpose means you no longer let temporary emotions dictate permanent decisions. You choose direction based on alignment, not fear. You make decisions according to who you are becoming, not who you used to be. You walk forward even when your surroundings shift because your purpose does not waver. You do not need the past to validate your future. You simply need to stay anchored in the truth of why you are walking this path at all. When release and purpose work together, transformation becomes not only possible, but unstoppable. Release clears the space. Purpose fills it with direction. Release removes what weakens you. Purpose strengthens what remains. Release ends the outdated. Purpose initiates the new. You cannot stand firm without release, and you cannot release without something firm to stand upon. Together, they create the foundation for ascension. Much of the pain you feel during transitions comes from resisting what is already trying to leave. You feel heaviness because you attempt to carry what is no longer meant for your hands. You feel confusion because you cling to what no longer matches your frequency. The moment you let go, clarity emerges like sunlight through clouds. You begin to feel lighter not because the world changed, but because you no longer fight the natural flow of your life's unfolding. Release does not weaken you. Refusing to release does. Holding on drains your energy, blurs your vision, and slows your momentum. But letting go restores your strength. It frees your mind. It opens your spirit. You begin to breathe again, not from your lungs alone, but from your soul. You begin to move again, not from panic, but from alignment. You begin to rise again, not through force, but through freedom. Look at nature. Leaves fall when their time is done. Animals shed what they no longer need. Rivers change course without resisting the natural shift of the land. Nothing in nature clings out of fear. Everything releases in order to remain in harmony with its purpose. You are being invited into that same harmony. What is falling away because your life is making room for something greater. Fighting the release only prolongs the discomfort. Accepting it accelerates the transition. Standing firm in purpose means trusting that the next chapter has already been prepared for you. You do not walk blind. You walk guided. You do not walk empty. You walk with deeper wisdom. You do not walk alone. You walk with strength gained from every season before this one. Purpose holds you steady when the external world shifts. It keeps you from shrinking when challenges arise. It reminds you that who you are becoming is worth more than what you are losing. You are not meant to cling to what keeps you small. You are meant to step into what calls you higher. Release is the doorway, purpose is the path, and your growth is the destination. As you let go of what is passing, you make space for the life that is waiting. As you stand firm in purpose, you walk into that life with power. The past was a chapter, the future is the story, and you are stepping into it fully, without fear, without hesitation, and without chains. Release what is passing. Stand firm in purpose. Your destiny expands from there. A greater dwelling awaits beyond the loss, though from where you stand now, it may be difficult to imagine anything beyond the threshold of what is leaving your life. Loss has a way of narrowing your vision, making it seem as though what is being taken is the only thing that ever mattered. But loss is not the end of your story. It is the bridge between what has fulfilled its purpose and what has been prepared for you. The dwelling ahead, whether a literal home, a new stage of life, a new identity, or a new calling, is not merely larger. It is more aligned, more authentic, more reflective of the person you are becoming. It is a place where your spirit will finally have the room to stretch without hitting the walls of limitation. The greater dwelling waiting for you cannot be occupied until the old one is released. This is the first truth you must accept. Your current space, physical or symbolic, was built around a version of you that has already been outgrown. It served your earlier needs, supported your earlier steps, sheltered your earlier identity, but it was never meant to hold your entire life's unfolding. It was a chapter, not the entire book. The new dwelling holds space for the entirety of who you are. It is constructed in a frequency that matches the strength and clarity you've gained through every challenge you have endured. It is shaped for the purpose you are stepping into. It is aligned with the expansion your soul has been quietly preparing for behind the scenes. But the transition between dwellings requires trust. There is always a moment in which you stand between what is leaving and what has not yet been revealed. That liminal space, the space between endings and beginnings, can feel unsettling because nothing familiar anchors you. Yet this very displacement is the same energy that prepares you. When the old walls fall away, when the old routines dissolve, when the old safety nets no longer hold, you are being freed from the constraints that could not accompany your elevation. The greater dwelling cannot be entered through the doorway of fear. It is accessed through the willingness to walk forward when you do not yet see the full structure ahead. There is a sacred order to this transition. Before a new dwelling can receive you, it must be prepared. Before you can inhabit it fully, you must be transformed in ways that allow you to hold what it offers. This is why loss often precedes arrival. It shapes you into someone who can handle the greater space, the greater responsibility, the greater clarity, and the greater calling that exists in that future environment. If you entered too early, the new space would feel overwhelming, or you would shrink yourself to fit the remnants of your old identity. But timing ensures that you arrive with the strength needed to thrive there, not merely survive. The new dwelling is not just a change of environment. It is a rise in dimension. It is a place where your old fears no longer dictate your choices. It is a place where your voice carries more authority because you have learned the truth of who you are. It is a place where opportunities align effortlessly because the clutter of outdated attachments has been cleared away. It is a place where relationships are rooted in authenticity rather than convenience. It is a place where your steps align with purpose instead of obligation. The new dwelling is not simply bigger, it is truer. Understand this: the greater dwelling does not arrive through force, it arrives through flow. It is not accessed through panic, but through surrender. Not through clinging, but through releasing. The journey toward it unfolds through a series of orchestrated events that remove you from what no longer aligns, even if those removals initially feel like loss. Every closed door, every unexpected ending, every shift in direction is a sign that you are being repositioned. You are not drifting. You are being guided. You are not losing your foundation. You are being placed on a stronger one. There is something deeply transformative about walking away from a space that can no longer sustain you. It teaches you self-trust. It teaches you resilience. It teaches you to rely on purpose instead of comfort, and on intuition instead of familiarity. These qualities are essential, because the greater dwelling requires a greater you. The version of yourself that existed in the old dwelling cannot thrive in the new one. That version was shaped by past seasons, past needs, past fears. But the new dwelling is shaped for the person you are becoming, bolder, clearer, more aligned, more powerful, more open to receiving what is meant for you. When you finally step into the greater dwelling, you will understand why the loss was necessary. You will see that nothing valuable was taken, only what was too small to contain your growth. You will feel the difference in the air. You will sense the spaciousness not just physically but spiritually. You will realize that the heaviness you carried in the old space was not a flaw within you but a sign that your surroundings no longer matched your evolution. When you walk through the doorway of the greater dwelling, the tension you once felt dissolves. Your spirit will expand unapologetically because it finally has permission to take up its rightful space. The greater dwelling is also a reflection of the new opportunities forming in your life. It represents the next stage of your calling. It holds the relationships that will uplift you, the environments that will nourish your gifts, the paths that will lead to deeper fulfillment. It is where your creativity flows more freely, where your purpose sharpens, where your inner peace strengthens. It is a place where you are not surviving transitions, you are thriving in alignment. But to reach it you must stay open. You cannot mourn the old so deeply that you miss the new. You cannot grip the familiar so tightly that your hands remain closed to the blessings waiting to fill them. You cannot fear the void so intensely that you forget the void is the womb of creation. What seems like emptiness now is simply the clearing required for the dwelling ahead. When you finally arrive, you will not feel like you found a new home. You will feel like you found your true home, a place that recognizes your spirit and meets it with resonance, a place that reflects the truth you once doubted, a place that honors the strength it took to leave what no longer aligned, a place that feels like freedom. Beyond this loss is not nothingness. Beyond this loss is not abandonment. Beyond this loss is not regression. Beyond this loss is the dwelling you were always meant to inhabit once you grew into the person capable of receiving it. A greater dwelling awaits, and when you step into it, you will know why the old one had to fall away.